introduce my friend Kenneth, who we have not had a chance to talk lately, mainly because of the pandemic. I'm not going out, and I'm sure he's very limited in what he's doing. So, but it's always good when we do hang. It's always good to catch up on a lot of things. He can tell you his story, but I always found him to be, I mean, there's a lot of great writers in prison. I mean, just to let you know. He just happens to be one of the guys that really committed to it and made writing a powerful tool for himself and for the community. So I'm going to just go ahead and have, Kenneth, the question for you is your life, what you've been through, but also how you felt about the process, how you feel about this amazing book that you helped put together.
Thank you, Louis. Thank you for inviting me. Really appreciate this. I'm always glad to hang with you too. For me, it's like a great honor when Louis says I was a teacher for him. So, I mean, I don't know. I feel like he's just being overly nice right now, but I'll take it anyways. So, yeah, I went to prison when I was 19 years old. I grew up in North Long Beach. Like a lot of other young men from that area, I was drugs and booze and all that. And when I was 19 years old, I killed a man named Thomas Allen Fellows in a fist fight in Ramona Park. I was sentenced to life without the possibility of parole. It wasn't a big shock for me. Many of my friends went to prison. A lot of people I knew were formerly in prison or in jail, or, like I often tell people, I've been out now for about 2.5 years, but I often tell people when I go places and speak, I say, I'm not the most representative face of who's in prison. Prison in California is primarily people of color, but there are poor people there, and I certainly was poor growing up. And when I went to prison, I went with it. I was like, this is my life. I'm going to spend the rest of my life there. And my first 10 years or so, I was high and drunk and fighting and doing all the other dumb stuff that young men tend to do. And for a variety of things, in my late 20s, I decided I wanted to become a different person. I got clean and sober. I've been clean and sober for 31 years now. I decided I wanted to live a different kind of life. I wanted to be a different kind of person. And I set out on a long journey of trying to become the person that I should have always been. And, and then 38 years later, the same governor who was the governor when I went to prison was the governor again, which is kind of only could happen in California, right? And that governor decided he was going to look at people sentenced to life without the possibility of parole and decided to commute some sentences. I was one of the first 3, and I was one of the first 2 people who were released as adult sentenced life without parole prisoners in like 25 years or something. And I've been out now about 2.5 years. I live in Santa Monica. Since I got out, I've been deeply involved in prison reform and, and trying to change what's going on inside of the prisons. I feel a deep commitment to the people I left behind. I'm also involved in victim offender dialogues because I know that the other side of the coin, there are human beings who suffered as well from the things that some of us did. I know I was guilty. And so I've tried to see both sides of that picture and try to become a force for good and help people understand what it's like to be in prison and help people in prison understand what it's like to be folks on the other side of that coin and try to find ways for healing and growth and practice restorative justice and hopefully transformational justice as we move along. And Louis and I, like Louis said, we've known each other for a long time. Met Louis when I was in prison. I wrote a memoir called Mother California. Louis read it and says nice things about it. I think he's being honest. And I've wrote a bunch of other things too, been published in Harper's Magazine and several other New York Times, LA Times, all that kind of stuff. Have written in Harper's Magazine a couple of times since I've been out. And I'm working on a variety of projects. Some of them involve writing too. I joke to people, the only thing I miss about prison is free time, because as it turns out, there's not a lot of free time out here on this side of the fences. Inside you could say, well, I'm going to spend the next 2 weeks doing nothing but working on this writing project. And it doesn't work that way out here. You got to pay the bills and, all that kind of stuff. So, but yeah. And when Louis asked me if I was interested in collaborating with him on the book, Make a Poem Cry, I was both flattered and intimidated by the giant box of submissions we had to work with. And they were all good. And that's the thing. And like Louis alluded to earlier, there is a tremendous amount of talent inside of prisons, writing, music, arts, speaking, you know, anything you could think of. There's a tremendous amount of talent inside of prisons. And another thing I often tell people when I speak, and I speak around the country at colleges and places like that about the prison experience, you know, the first thing you have to remember about people in prison is they're human beings, and which means they're just like you. You know, they're no different. They're not like monsters. They don't have different sized heads or something, or, you know, or tails or whatever. They're fellow human beings who made poor choices and bad decisions and often come out of terrible circumstances themselves. And, you know, and that means that there's going to be a whole wide spectrum of folks inside prison, just like there are outside of prison. And there are tremendous, talented people who are trying to do well. And the vast majority of people in prison, the vast, vast majority of people in prison want to be better than their worst moment and spend every day trying to do that. And that's the experience I had in my 38 years of prison. So I'm glad that we've took a long time for us to get through the whole thing, but I'm glad the book is finally out there. And I think it's a great collection of really some powerful writing. Reading all of the pieces that were submitted was a really a kind of a transformative experience to read so much passion and energy and longing and desire and love and frustration and anger. It was a massive pile of just a tremendous output of the human spirit. And it was very difficult for us to whittle it down to the relatively small number that are in the book, but we think the selection that we made is a good representation of the kind of things you'll find. And one of the people who is well represented in the book is my friend, Daniel Whitlow, who is standing by to read us one of his beautiful poems. He is also a spectacular musician, and he is just an all-around super awesome guy. And I'm so happy that he's out. I got out a little bit before him, but I'm so happy he's out now too. And I'll pass it over to my friend Daniel to read one of his poems.
Wow, thanks, Ken. Appreciate you saying all that. I think you were probably telling the truth too, since we're all being honest and telling the truth today. So, Louis, first of all, thank you. Rebecca, Ramiro, it's good to see you guys. And it's an honor for me to be here with you guys today. I was 17 when I went to prison. I received an LWOP sentence for taking 2 lives. I damaged hundreds of others, if not thousands of others in the process. And like Ken, I made a lot of mistakes too in the first 10, 15, 20 years of my life after going to prison, because I really didn't understand why I had done what I had done. It took me a long time to get there. One of the ways that I did that was through writing, was through exploring these ideas and writing and trying to make sense of what I had done and how I had gotten to that point. Because I never really saw myself as a violent person or as a traumatized person. I didn't identify with trauma in that way. And so the question that had plagued me, especially in the about 10 years after I was arrested, was that I didn't understand how I had gotten to that point. It's so uncharacteristic of the person that I thought that I was, the way that I saw myself. But I lacked self-reflexivity because I wasn't really able to see who I really was or how I was ignoring the traumas that had plagued me as a young person. I just assumed that they would go away. But like I think most young people who turn to violence or turn to crime as a way to express themselves and work through their problems, I think I just assumed that because I hurt, the only way to remove that hurt was to hurt others. That somehow by reciprocating that hurt towards other people, it was going to make me feel better. And unfortunately, that led to disastrous consequences, destructive consequences. And it didn't alleviate my ache or my pain at all in any way. If anything, it only amplified it and then spread it to other people. So when I started writing, and much of my writing started after I initially met Louis, but when I started writing, I had some particular ideas that I wanted to write about. I really wanted to understand the source of trauma and how it manifests in people's lives, specifically my own. But as I went on, I wanted to understand it a little bit more, how it manifests in everyone's lives and some of the different forms that it takes. And the disturbing thing about that is that trauma takes any form that it can, that it is this kind of morphic, malleable thing that doesn't adhere to our understanding of it. It just takes control of us in many ways without making itself clear or apparent. But one thing I did find is that trauma is of our, in many ways, is of our creation. We perpetuate our traumas often by not understanding them, by not recognizing them, by not understanding them, and then by not changing them. And I think this book in particular, I've read the entire thing. I think it's a really good sampling of people coming to terms with trauma and understanding it on a fundamental level, which is really important, and it's a good sign. Because without understanding our traumas on a fundamental level, there's no possible way that we could ever remove it. There's no possible way we could ever work through it, and then find the peace that comes with acceptance and trying to make ourselves into better people. And Louis and Ken, you guys did a great job on the book. I'm gonna read just one piece. It's the very last piece in the book. And so it speaks to that idea. It's called An End with No Beginning. And it speaks to that idea that trauma, we convince ourselves, or trauma convinces us, that without this pain that we feel, we don't have anything else. And I was at that point in my life for a long time where I felt like if I wasn't suffering, if I didn't have some bitterness or some resentment in my heart, then I had nothing. I felt that it was the only thing that I had. It was the only thing that propelled me to get up in the morning, because that anger was in me, because that resentment was in me. And it was sort of a strange experience to form a connection and a bond with my anger and my resentment, as if we were friends, as if my resentment was a good thing, as if it was like a provider for me. And so this is the poem sort of speaks to the strange misunderstanding that I think a lot of people have, where they think that their anger or that their negativity is somehow helping them. And this poem sort of speaks to that odd kind of abusive, dysfunctional relationship. I couldn't be more sincere. There's nothing I wouldn't do to prove it to you. We could have laid amongst gravestones, sharpened grass growing from the silently screaming mouths of the buried. We've lost sight of what we're blind to, and as undergrowth suffocated, we never figured the end was near. It was as if you poured acid down my throat and restored what was destroyed. It's the belly of the burdens we shoulder that hungers. Miserable excuses diminish elusive dreams, and for all of the troubles, we simply walk away. For now, I struggle to breathe, but worry not, tomorrow I'll stop. I used to imagine what it was like to speak your name, ghostly and flat, echoing like a gasping wheeze. But the night no longer calls to me. It no longer holds the key to my suffering. It's empty as your silence has left me. I have dusk in my eyes as haunting reflections of you manifest before me. Like torn canvas, the portrait lay in ruin. Beads of glass where your eyes should be, absently prism colorless energy. What once was is no more. But may I still hold you against me? I couldn't lie to you if I tried, and I've tried. But I couldn't lie to you if I tried, though I've tried. I think that, like Ken said, there's an incredible amount of talent in prison. And I am painfully aware of the people that I left behind. Painfully aware of all of the men that I have left behind. Because those men that I left behind, they saved my life. They changed me for the better in every way. And they never asked for anything in return. They didn't ask me to send them packages. They don't ask me to write them letters. They don't ask me to go to the Capitol and fight for them. They did it because they love me. If that's not evidence that the people in prison are human beings, then I don't really know what is. Yeah, there's monsters in prison. Sure, there are people who are sociopaths and psychopaths and hurt others, but there's a reason for that. There's a reason that they hurt people. It's because they hurt, and they need people to help them. You know, I was a kid when I came in, and people put their asses on the line to protect me. So many times in my terms, I came this close to being just another statistic. I was a young kid. I had a good family. I wasn't in that criminal mindset. I wasn't a gang member. So I was easy to take advantage of in a lot of ways. And there were people who might be labeled by society as deplorable, as monsters, as all those things, who showed an incredible amount of passion, compassion, and consideration for me and helped me. They taught me how to survive, and they protected me. For the rest of my life, without question, until the day that I die, and maybe even past that, I will continue to fight for those people, not only to bring about change, but to contribute to the moments that are out there right now and any movement that may come in the future, to try to be able to help those men get a second chance, because those small acts of compassion that they did for me and maybe did for many others, those small acts of compassion, in my opinion, are proof that they're human beings, and all human beings deserve a second chance. And with that, I guess I'll turn it over to whoever. I'm done rambling. Thank you.
Yeah, it's me. My phone was just finishing here. Thank you, Daniel. Thank you, Kenneth, both of you. I hope this provides at least some insight as to what's going on in the prisons, but also with the creation of a book like this. But before we go on, I do want to ask my son Ramiro to say something. And, you know, I didn't ask him to do this. It's just, as you know, if you know my story, I've been going to prisons before my son got into all this trouble. He himself got in trouble, and I have to say, of his own accord. You know, he had his own issues. He had his own hurts. He had his own angers and rages that he had to address and deal with. Some are related to me, which as a father, I've had to address, I've had to deal with. But, and he ended up, as many of you people know, close to 15 years in prison, 13 and a half years, the last stretch. I just have to say that me and him have gone through so much in our journey as father and son. We've gone through hard times, bad times, rough times, but we also gone through some beautiful, amazing times. We've grown up together in many ways. So I want him to say a few words because he's here, and he's always helped me with just staying in this work and why I stay in this work. And even though he's been out now for 10 years, this year will be 10 years of his being released. He's also met Kenneth and Daniel, and he's also helped with the trauma transformation, working with Rebecca and some the other formerly incarcerated people that go into the parolee housing and formerly incarcerated. So I'm going to just say a few words because you're so important to all this. So.
Well, thank you, everyone. I'm really happy to see so much interest in this month's book club. I think this is a very important topic. Make a Poem Cry was a very important book. I also want to thank my dad and Kenneth and Daniel and Rebecca and just everybody that has helped me since I've been living here. I've been living in LA for about, I think, almost 6 years, you know, since I've been home. So for me, my prison time was in Illinois. I'm from Chicago. Like my dad said, I did close to 15 years, 13 and a half. And then before that, I had also done some other prison times. But I just want to say that, you know, the conversations that need to be had are not being had, at least in the Illinois prison part. I mean, California has a lot of good programs. Illinois doesn't have these programs. Now it is state by state. Not, it's by prison in the state. Sorry, and it all depends on whether there's a college or maybe some churches in the area of the town where the prison's at, that those programs will be provided. But it's not a statewide program like California has. I'm not saying California is perfect. I know there's a lot of issues, but it's doing a lot way better than what Illinois is even wanting to provide. And then, and even in the city of Chicago, as you all know, there's a lot of things that are happening there, and they're not being addressed in the right way. And I really like Daniel's what Daniel has been saying about where these traumas are coming from, because those are the issues and the questions that 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 need to be investigated, because all they're trying to say is that they're just criminals and they just want to lock them up, but no one's going to the root of the poverty, the desperation, the traumas, the things that there's no resources in those communities in Chicago that no one is providing for them. So, all the media is putting out, they're looting and they're doing all of these crazy things and they're doing all of this. But me and my dad, we just had two friends of ours come in from Chicago like 2 weeks ago, telling us the stories that are happening out there, and they're doing great work out there, but media's not picking up on that. We have another friend of ours that's been going into the Stateville prison, has been going into the county, doing crisis interventions with young people, but you don't see that on the media, and you don't see all those things, that a lot of young people are trying to do to help. So the best way for that to come out is in these writings, and my dad could probably attest to it. All over the world, we have artists and writers, and in these prison systems, we have revolutionaries. The solutions to probably all our issues, our problems, are probably in the prison system, but they're all, but there's no one to give them a voice. There's no one to, channel all that energy, and that needs to be, that needs to be done. And Make a Poem Cry is a good, and it's just a fraction, but it's a good way for that to be addressed. And I'm really happy that everybody participated in this. And like I said, those issues, those things that we need to investigate. I think that we need to just really, just pay attention to all of that. Like Daniel and Kenneth, I know I harmed a lot of people in my life. I've done a lot of trauma. I've caused trauma to other people, and the only way that I feel like that I can try to make amends for all of that is just to try to bring back to my community now. It's hard. It's been hard for me these last 6 years living here. I was born here. I was born in East LA, and I grew up in South Central, but I left when I was young, and then 30 years of my life was in Illinois, in Chicago, and half of that was in prison. So I pretty much grew up in Chicago. So coming back here, trying to reconnect from where I was at in my birth has not been easy, because I don't know, I feel kind of lost. But I still write poetry, and that really has been helpful for me, being able to express a lot of those things that I've been dealing with. Honestly, sometimes I feel like I'm back in prison living here. It's just another world for me, But I'm happy every day waking up, because I know that I'm not in the same place that I was 10 years ago, and that's the difference, And I've also been clean. I've been sober. I've been for over 20 years. I've been clean and sober, and thank you. And I'm gonna just tell you that that's very important. That is the sobriety. I try to tell a lot of these young people, because we still have a connection with young people. I still talk to them, but that sobriety is so important. I was not in a good state of mind when I was drinking or I was on drugs, but I'm not going to tell you that was my excuse, because honestly, a lot of my crimes that I did, I was sober. But I know it affected me in certain ways, especially with my community, and how I was just being a very angry and violent person, and providing all this destruction in my community, and unfortunately too, it affected my family, affected my siblings, my kids. I know I look 20 years old, but I have grandkids, so I I have 4 grandkids, you know, so I have to be a better person for all of them. Everybody, they know my story, but I want my grandkids to know that their grandfather is not the same person that he was, you know, and that's important for me. So again, thank you for everyone taking an interest. I hope we do more of these like this too in other forums, because, like I said, there's a lot of great people that are artists, the writers, thinkers, philosophers, revolutionaries. They're all in these prison systems, man, and we have to tap into that energy. We really do. There's a lot of things that are happening in this world right now, and there's not a lot of solutions. But I bet you there's guys thinking about it, and they've been writing it down, and no one is there to to see it. No one is there to know about, you know, the solutions that are available. So okay, again, thank you all.
I think it was good to have the insight. These 3 men who've been there and now they're out and living as good as lives as anybody can live, and it isn't easy for either one of them, for any of them. But I want to open it up to you all. I think there's 2 ways you can ask questions, right? You can raise your hand and or in the chat, right? Isn't there a way? But maybe, Rebecca, you can help me with that. If you see somebody that has a question, let me know. Otherwise, just raise your hand and we'll try to get as many people, or comments, anything you might want to say about what we shared. Hopefully you all got a chance to get the book and read it, because you'll see it's just powerful work in here. And again, as somebody said, it's just the fraction, right? Ramiro said, a fraction of what's out there. There's so much more really wonderful work that we wish we could have published.
Mosqueda has their hand up.
Okay, so go ahead and ask your question or comment.
Looks like you're mute, Sergio.
I'm sorry, I was muted. My name is Sergio. I wanted to ask you if, as brief as you can be, can tell us how is the writing program structured in prisons? When you mentioned that you go to prisons, is it here in the state of Arizona?
So I do my creative writing classes in the state of California. I do it at Lancaster State Prison, which is state prison in LA County. It's the only state prison in LA County, even though I understand 60% of the prisoners in the state come from LA County. It's the only one. The way that I structure it, because it's not structured by the CDCR, the California prison system, it's structured by me, is I structure it by seeing creative writing as a way to think creatively and live creatively. I don't really teach them how to write, even though a lot of questions that you guys give me is about how to write, how to do this, and we'll get into it. But they do have other classes, college classes, where they can learn particulars of grammar and syntax. That's not really my emphasis. My emphasis is more why, and also all the various ways that you can express yourself through writing. Some of these guys just want a journal. They're not really trying to do anything. They just want a place to just give me a journal. I just want to express myself by myself. But a lot of them, and I'm not surprised, but some of them have plays already. Some have novels. Some have a whole mess of scripts for movies. I mean, it's amazing the times that they put in their work. And then there's a lot of guys in between. And some of them had never thought they would be writers. And then once they got going, I want to do this. I want to be a writer. I want to get published. And so that's what I structure about. It's more for me important to know that this is all about being a more whole and more healed and a more strong, solid person in the world than just writing. But writing is a powerful tool to get there.
Thank you.
Anybody else? Yeah, Mary Ann, I can see.
Hi there. Thank you, everybody, for those beautiful words. I'm wondering, all of you who have been affected by this system, I'm wondering how you feel about what is happening right now with, the reaction to the George Floyd killing and, these other atrocities. And do you think that, people are saying, talking about police, but do you think that will trickle down to the prison system? You know, just what are your general thoughts about how everything is going on, and if you think it'll have any kind of real effect on change?
Yeah, good. So Kenneth has hand up. I think we'll have the guys say something on that. Go ahead, Kenneth.
Yeah, thank you, Marianne. Let me turn that loud noise off. Yeah, so I think it already has had some impact, and it's sort of connected to probably less the heroic struggle of oppressed people to stand up to the oppression they've been under all these years, and to the COVID-19 crisis, which has revealed how horrifically bad the medical system is inside our prisons. In California, the death rate from COVID-19 at San Quentin would be the equivalent if there had been 3.5 million people died in the United States if the same rate had been happening. So, I mean, it exposed the terrible conditions that people are in, particularly as it applies to medical things. And I think, but I think going more to the point that you were making, Marianne, I think there's unquestionably, there is a movement now, and I'm involved in a lot of prison reform work with the Transformative In-Prison Work Group, a couple of other things I'm involved with that are trying to change the way prison operates. I think people are beginning to realize that running prison systems as a way to crush people and make them feel pain is actually not a system that produces anything good. It produces angry, frustrated people who can't live in society very well. And whereas we have other places, like Louis said, in Europe, I was lucky to go to Norway and Finland about a year ago and tour the prisons there. And the thing that I noticed first and foremost about those prisons were they treat the people in there like fellow human beings, like they're their neighbors, I mean, the healthcare they get in the prisons in Norway is literally by the same hospital that the people in the town that the prison is located they are getting their healthcare. So I think if anything, I like to believe that all of the things that are happening with the uprisings that have happened, the long overdue uprisings that have happened, are bringing to light the fact that treating people as if they're not fellow human beings is an ultimately terrible strategy, and it's morally wrong, and it's a bankrupt idea. And I think that, the United States incarcerates more people than any country in the history of the world. There are more black people in prison in America by ratio than there were in South Africa at the height of apartheid. I mean, this country is a horrific abuser of human beings. It has from the very beginning. And I think that a lot of things that are happening are opening people's eyes to what's really going on. And I'd like to believe that it will impact what's going on inside the prisons too.
Yeah, Daniel, you have anything you want to share with that on this?
I can't imagine that I would say it any better than it's already been said. I will only say that the way that arrested development is purposefully applied to people in prison, the process of institutionalization is it's not a natural process, it's an unnatural process, but it does happen on its own. But the system is built specifically to condition, to brainwash, and to arrest the development of everybody in prison, because the programs are specifically designed to break people down and essentially just leave them broken. It's not a recuperative system. It's not meant to help people. It's interesting. Ken was a major part in the creation of the Honor Yard, where Louis came for the first time. And this happened at the beginning of the 2000s. And along with him and the people that helped him get it going, that yard changed everything. It changed everything for the guards. It changed everything for the people that were on the yard. And it even, indirectly, it changed everything for the people that were on the yards that were around it, or that associated with it or knew it. Because it was a change in the way that things were done. That's what needs to be, that's what needs to happen, specifically in the prison system. You can make the argument for everywhere, socially, everywhere we need to have change, but specifically for prisons, it's all about changing the incarcerated mindset and changing how power dynamics are used to capitalize on people's fear, on their anger, on their weakness, on whatever it is, on their lack of knowledge, self-awareness. So the system, the state system, is designed specifically to subjugate people and to leave them broken and not trying to make themselves any better. The yard that Ken helped start, the Honor Yard, which then became the Progressive Programming Facility in Lancaster, that was a yard that was driven by prisoner-led programs, not state programs, because believe me, the state did not get involved with the programs until Prop 57. They had volunteers and prisoner-led people. So only when legislators, only when the people of California forced them to help us, then they sort of like randomly threw together some programs, which ironically in Lancaster, it was just taking programs that already existed there and then just putting a different name to them, unfortunately. But any help is good help, but the prisoner population were the ones that actually pushed it for many, many years. I think that's something that's worthy of having its time everywhere. Prisoners need to be able to start from day one in a program that helps them to understand how they got to that point where they broke the law. We cannot wait to deal with people's traumas until they're a 37 or a 46-year-old person who's already lived with that mindset for so long. Yeah, we do need to help those people too, but it's the younger people that we need to help. It's the people who are in their first 10 years or in adolescence that have traumas that they don't understand. And how could we possibly expect them to understand? How are you going to expect a 15-year-old to understand the complex dynamics of their relationship with their parents and the relationship with their friends and how they feel about themselves? And then you get drugs involved, you get gangs involved, and you get all these other things going. That's a lot for adults. That's a lot for people with good educations. That's a lot for everyone. So let alone some young person who has no bearing, no understanding of the world at large. They're just kind of a small fish caught in a riptide. So we need to try to figure out a way to introduce those types of approaches from the root of the trauma before it becomes a problem. And even though that's a big ask, I think we have the ability to do it. I mean, like Ken said, we have, and Ken and Ramiro said, we have so many incredible minds that are available to us, both in the free world and in the incarcerated world. We need to actually start listening to some of these people's ideas. And I'm really, really hoping that the government, but specifically the state and the CDCR, can open their minds and their hearts to what these people are talking about, to some of the solutions that some of the people are trying to share. Because I really think that what we need is a solution, because we have plenty of problems. We actually need to start solving some of them. And one possible solution could just be start with developing trauma resiliency and awareness in prisoners that are just coming into the system. I think that would fundamentally change the system. And it's definitely something I think we need.
Ramiro, you want to say something on this too?
Well, I just want to say also, that we are a resilient people. I mean, we have that gangster mentality, and we did it in such a negative way. But now we're trying to channel it in a more positive way. We're transcending that energy in a higher level that would keep us alive, but also that will help us try to change the world. We don't have to be here. We don't. We came out of, especially Daniel and Kenneth, and the time that they done. Shoot, why are they here? Why do they even want to talk to anybody? They might want to kick back after doing 20, 30 years in prison. You know what I'm saying? But this is important. This is important to us. We have it in our corazones, in our hearts, to know that we want to make changes. We've hurt a lot of people. We've done a lot of bad things. We know that. And we held ourselves accountable for that. And we've done what we had to do. We did our time. So now we want to make a contribution. And we aren't the only ones. There are a lot of guys and women and even young people. The juvenile court systems, the way they treat these young people is atrocious sometimes, you know. And I'm really happy for Rebecca being able to connect with a lot of the juvenile prison systems here in California, and for trauma to transformation to be able to go in there and help a lot of these young people, beautiful minds, beautiful souls, you know what I'm saying, that are just, you know, lost and have been through some very rough, traumas, you know. So like I said, it's just, it's important for us to have this conversation. It's important for us to be here. For me, you know, like I said, I'm from Chicago, so my experiences is a little different. The way they treat their people in these prison systems and in the county jail, it's just really bad. There's no, you know what I'm saying, it's enslavement and it's a death sentence. And especially when this COVID-19 stuff came in, you know, like they just want to round them up like cattle and then just let them die. We don't have the kind of numbers like San Quentin has, but Stateville Prison is the main prison where they just started corralling all these guys that are coming from the county into this one prison. That was their solution to try to help COVID, and these guys were dying. You know what I'm saying? And they were all catching it. That's how they were, like I said, it was like animals. You know, and that's unfortunate because, you know, especially with the families and people that are trying to help them, and now their loved ones are gone because, you know, and a lot of them, they won't give them answers. They won't talk to their families, you know, what happened, you know what I'm saying? So, you know, it's sad, but like I said, there's a lot of guys that are staying strong. We know people that are talking to people in those prison systems. They're working hard in it, but they're doing it themselves. You know, Daniel was talking about how there's the programs that don't exist. It's the same thing in Illinois. Those programs don't exist. So the guys do it themselves, you know, and they do it together as a collective, and they have to, because no one else is going to do it for them. And they understand that, you know, and like I said, in this energy, they were doing it in the gang world. They were recruiting. They were doing all of those things. And now you see all of these guys that are really doing positive things, and it's amazing. But you won't see it unless you have to be a part of it, which is sad because it should be more brought out, you know. So yeah.
If I could add one thing very quickly, and Ramiro just hit on it. A perspective is so important, and you can live inside of a traumatized perspective for a long time and only see what it is that justifies your negativity. And that's part of what trauma does, right? It gives you what you want to see so that you feel justified in what you're doing. But at some point, there's something that I've read a lot about. It's called full acculturation. And it's when a prisoner or somebody who's incarcerated reaches a point where they no longer want to or desire to prescribe to that prisoner identity, that identity that the incarcerated have. And they get to the point where they've reached the sort of their limit, and then they decide to change. This is not something that just happens to 1 out of 10. If given the opportunity, people will change. People will. If they have the programs available to them, they will get there. Full acculturation, it might not happen for every single prisoner. I think it's dependent on their trauma, but I guarantee you that 8 or 9 out of 10, especially the guys that Ken and I have known on Ayard and Lancaster, is a great example of it. I would say 90% of the people on that yard are serious. Okay, now that might not be true of all prisons. That might not be true of all systems, but that's definitely true on that yard. So if it's true there, then it potentially is true other places. If 9 out of 10 people that receive the sentence of life or life without or something like that, after 15 or 20 years in some classes, suddenly they have some perspective that changes their mind, and now they want to try to make the world a brighter, more beautiful place. Well, it seems to me like it's a crime to keep that type of person from doing that, especially considering I walk around on the streets of LA and I see so many people that are so friggin' rude. They're so rude, and they only care about themselves. They don't care about anything else except what's going on their phone or what's going on in their lives. But these are the same people that to their friends and to their family say, oh, I really care about the plight of those people that are impoverished, or I really, really want to help my world, or man, society's so important to me. I want to contribute to it. Well, sending $5 on Google Pay is not a contribution to society. That's just a tiny part. I think what's really important is being invested and compassionate about other people and not totally cut off and rude to other people. Those people in prison, a lot of those people would give their lives to other people. They would literally dedicate their entire existences to other people. And that's a lot to ask. And it's also a pretty extraordinary act of compassion to dedicate your lives to trying to make systems better, to make people's lives better, to try to save lives and potentially help people heal. So yeah, thank you. Thank you for letting me ramble, sorry.
No, it's all right. And you know what you guys should know if you don't know, a yard is no lightweight yard. They're talking about a yard with lifers, life without possibly parole, with people who have done some serious crimes. But it is true what they're saying. These are guys who are committed to change, helping others change. That's what I have seen. So yeah, so it ain't no lightweight. We say, oh, are they a minimum security? No, this is a high security yard of guys who are saying, I've been there, I've done that, I want to do something different. Just so you know what he's talking about. The next question is from Michelle.
Oh, hello. Hi, Mr. Luis. Hello. Well, I would just like to say that I'm very thankful that we were able to read this book this month. And like my personal experience with jail or prison has been through family members. And if it wasn't for my aunt, I think I would be very naive about a lot of things, but also she's a very personable person and really kind, and she can be really great, but she just, you know, has issues with substance abuse and stuff like that. But I think her influence in my life has enabled me to not otherize people that are imprisoned and be able to reach out. Like I've been able to write people that were in prison. I also used to work through my church and go and do sign language to gospel music for the detainees in the juvenile hall out here in Silmar. And like, I think it's very important for us to not otherize people and to try to think like, how would I feel if I was in this situation? And another personal experience that I've dealt with is chronic disability illnesses. And so sometimes I feel like a prisoner in my body. I can't do certain things. I'm not at liberty. And I know that that's a very faint example, but I can be free in my mind. And I'm glad to have been able to read these stories and poems and give voice to tears that we seldomly acknowledge in society outside of incarceration. Thank you.
Thank you, Michelle. That was actually very important because I think it's important for us to know, at least I feel, that many of us are in some level of prison somewhere, whether it's a disability, whether it's a mental thing, whether it's our addictions, whether it's our narrowness. I'm all of us. And so you got to know what the keys of liberation are, even in a limited, finite world. That to be free, you have to understand the very laws of the limitations you're in. And this is something that I have had to learn, because when I'm in the prisons, I try to give these men and women, when I'm in the women's prison, the keys to liberation. Not to say that we shouldn't take the walls down. That's another struggle. It's an important struggle. But we can let them know, no matter where you're at, you're still a human being capable of amazing, abundant things. Capable of amazing, powerful, beautiful, truthful, beautiful, and decent things. That, I think, is what's important, so that people don't feel like they're locked in and they can't do that no matter what. So any prison can be taken down if you have those keys. So I appreciate that. And I think Sergio had a question.
Yes, thank you, Luis. This question is for Kenneth. Here you are spending, if I understood correctly, 30 years of your life inside the system, and going through all states of mind. Oh, well, what the heck? So this is it. And then you start seeing the possibility of coming out, thanks to Jerry Brown and starting to reach out to you guys there. And bingo, here you are. You are selected. You qualified to be one of the first one to, as they put it, reintegrate to society. Tell us about the process of you institutionalizing yourself. What were what were you worried about the outside world? What made you nervous about it? What made you, which I doubt, think that I better stay here? How was that process?
Sure. Thank you for that question, Sergio. And I don't think at any point did I ever say I want to stay here and not go out. I can say that with confidence. But you know, I think for me, so I have to go back a little bit. When there used to be conjugal visits in California prisons, and lifers could access them, and I was married at one point, and I had a daughter. My daughter is now 24 years old. She lives in San Francisco. Louis met her. Daniel's met her. She's a lovely young woman. I don't know if Ramiro ever met my daughter or not, but and I think, so that gave me a sense of being somehow connected to the outside, maybe more than a lot of people. My daughter and I have a very close relationship. She used to visit a lot when I was in prison. We talk on the phone to this day, almost every single day. So that helped me a lot. I had a lot of friends. I had built up a lot of, by being an activist inside prison, by being a writer. I had a lot of friends. I had a lot of connections with a lot of people. So I had a lot of advantages in that sense. But getting out was, in some ways, it was terrifying, to be real about it. And I think most of us, if we're honest with ourselves, who did a lot of time, will admit it's a scary process. I went to a transitional house in next to Cal State LA, and I can remember when I first got there, looking out the windows, thinking, what would happen if I just walked down the street? Are people going to know that I was in prison? Are people going to start yelling at me? I mean, is it going to be like, is it going to be an ugly situation? So with my reaction, because of the kind of person I am, and everyone who knows me personally knows this, everybody I met, like if I got in an Uber, I would tell the Uber driver, I just got out of prison. I would tell everybody that. I tell this story, and it was actually on a podcast recently, but when the day I got out, I went to the Verizon store in Lancaster to get a telephone. And it was a young woman was the salesperson. And she said, so what kind of phone do you want to get? And I said, well, I want to get an iPhone, and I'm not sure how much memory I should get. And she says, well, how much memory is in your current phone? And it was one of those decisions, like right on the spot, I had to say to myself, what do I want to say? So she was the first person. I just looked her in the face and I said, well, I've never had a phone before. I've been in prison for the last 38 years. And the look on her face, she kind of went, and then she just kind of leaned towards me and she said, you won't need much memory then. But it was, and I think I learned in that moment that I had to own it and be upfront about it with people. And I have been from the very beginning. There have been a couple of people, I could tell by the look on their face, they were like, you know, a little taken back. But, you know, the vast majority of people have been welcoming, have been kind, have been open. And I've been blessed in that sense. And I'm sure that in many ways I've been lucky, and I know that. But so the process for me has just been owning my life, talking to people directly about it. And part of my process of reentry has been to take what I have learned inside and transfer it out here. Something Daniel said earlier, I've heard from many people who get out of prison. The free world is full of many rude, self-involved people who are not a lot of fun to be around. And in prison, they would have a very, very hard time living in there because rude, self-involved people are not treated very well in prison. So I'm super polite. I'm the person when the server comes to the table with the food, I say, thank you so much. I'm the person who offers to help lift the trays up to the person. And people, sometimes I'll be at a table and they'll be looking at me like, what's wrong with this guy? But in my mind, I'm like, I'm polite and kind to everyone because I would like to be treated politely and kindly myself. So that's how I've done it. And so far, so good. Everything's gone really well. So hope that answers your question.
You've been out?
I've now been out a little over 2.5 years.
Thank you
You're welcome.
very much.
Can I just say
Yeah,
something
go ahead.
about Sergio's question and what Kenneth was addressing? You know, it was about changing our attitudes, you know, and how we want to be as men. You know, at least for me, I did the same things that Kenneth was talking about. I ended up trying to be a little bit nicer, and as some people know, I'm not always nice, you know. But I try not to curse.
Close to that.
I mean, it may seem like small little things, but these were the things. These little things are the things that needed to change for us in our attitudes, and that's how we were able to. Because we want to be better. We want to be more presentable in a positive way. It's so easy for us, especially when we grew up in that way, to go back. It's you don't realize how simple our rage and our anger can take over us. It is really so easy because this world gives that to us. When we come home, it's like it's tattooed on our backs that we don't belong. You know, they make it so hard for us to be here with jobs, with living. I mean, I know, like, even with Daniel and the place that they're at right now in that facility, you know, the way they get treated, why would they want to be nice to anybody? Why do they want to treat anybody, you know, in a good way? Like what Daniel was talking about, how people are so rude. Well, so if they're rude to me, I'm going to be rude back, right? Isn't that the mentality that a lot of people have, you know? But we don't, but we know that we go down that road, we're going to go end up right back to a place where we do not want to go back to, because we've experienced it. We've been there, and we know what happens when we do that, when we cross that road. So we have to change our attitudes. And I like what I read some of the comments about what Giovanni is talking about, decolonizing your mind, and that's what we have to do. Yes, you know, I mean, at least for me, you know, I follow my native traditions. You know, I'm a danzante. I sing songs. I do the things that I follow the Mexicano. You know what I'm saying? These are the things that have helped me. It's a spiritual part of my life that I didn't have. My spirituality, honestly, for me, was in the gang. Everything that in my gang life was my spiritual reality. We had symbols and all of these things that I would have died for and everything until I found out what was real. That was all illusionary. That was all man-made. What was in my bones, was in my blood, is my cultura, you know, my history, my ancestors, you know. That's what has helped me to survive and to be out here, you know, with my people and my family, and to connect to a world, like I said, that pretty much would love to have me back in prison. I know that it would, because, you know, that's just how they want it. That's just how they treat us. You know, they don't.
How long have you been out?
Yeah. Well, I've been home 10 years. I've been out 10 years.
Thank you.
Sergio, I want to say that I think anybody that is serious about coming home, anybody that's serious about changing their lives, they start the process of deinstitutionalization years before their release. I think that's the most important thing, is providing programs for people, because what you're doing is you're helping them to prepare for their eventual release.
Right.
The sentence of LWOP is wrong. It's unconstitutional. It's immoral. It's unethical. It's everything. It is a crime in and of itself. Assuming that at some point we get to the point where LWOP no longer exists, which is definitely something that I'm looking forward to, we need to make sure that people are already, not only are they not falling into the arrested development trap, but they also have opportunities to be able to change their lives many, many years before they're actually coming back out on the streets. One thing I want to add, and then I'll shut up. There is this idea there recently with the commutations. There has been this influx of interest in programs. there has always been a core population of prisoners that have been a part of programs for a long time. There could be a lot of reasons for that. It could be because they just they reached that fully acculturated state much sooner than other people. It could be that the circumstances of their lives and their offenses and stuff like that are different. There's a lot of different dynamics there, but what's common is somebody has LWAP. They don't take part of classes because they are hopeless, because they don't think that there's ever a chance that they're going to go home. And so, it's not that much. It's not much of a surprise that people that have LWAP are not going to go to, say, an Alcohol Anonymous meeting or a therapy session or something like that, because there's really no incentive for doing it, right? And oftentimes when we're stripped down to our bare essentials, we try to do what is incentivized. We try to do what is best for us in the moment. Then people get commutations. They receive the commutation and then they rush to the classes because suddenly now there's this need to have some classes under your belt. You got to start understanding these terms. You have to be able to speak your story and your narrative to the parole board so that you can get out of prison. Well, I would prefer a system that didn't have that. I prefer a system that people are enrolled in classes immediately, so that way 10 or 15 years down the line or 5 years down the line, when they have a chance to go before the parole board, they already know themselves better than anybody else. They are the expert of themselves in that room, which is what's required. And so I think for me, the institutionalization started when I got to A-Yard and I was given an opportunity to take classes. For me, that's when it started.
One quick question, Daniel. Which poets do you like nowadays? which poets do you read with certain regularity?
You mean other than Luis Rodriguez?
Well,
let's say that.
I read a lot of the classics. I'm a huge fan of classics. I really like William Blake. I love T.S. Eliot. E.E. Cummings is my favorite poet. And of course, there's a couple of guys that are even in Lancaster who I absolutely adore their writing. And I'm willing to say I'm a fan of myself.
Nothing wrong with that. Thank you very much.
You know what? There was a good question that was asked about women's prisons, and Kenneth in the chat gave an answer if you want to know what that was. I do go into the CIW, the California Institution for Women in Chino, and just so you know, it's true what Kenneth says. There's not as many women, but the number of women coming into prisons is escalating to their numbers, and there's not enough programming compared to whatever minimum exists in men's prison. It's even less in the women's prison. So my experience there is there's more animosity by staff and even some of the COs, correctional officers, to programming in the prison there at CIW. I've seen it, I felt it. It's like, why? Why don't you give these women more programming? There's a lot more animosity. So the other thing I want to point out is that since I've been going to prisons for so long, I will tell you, as I said before, there was a lot of people hostile to me being there and others like me. We were not that many of us. And they sabotaged us. They didn't get the guys. They would do everything to make sure it didn't work. But what happened is there became a little sea change. A lot of it was the honor yard, because the honor yard actually proved if you give people this incentive, they will make the changes they need to make. And that was provable. The honor yard isn't perfect. That's not the point. But compared to with the other yards, the numbers they were in, I mean, I forget the statistics, but the violence went down in that yard. The drug use went down. There was all kinds of things. The interracial battles that didn't exist in that yard. So this, to me, is what made it very important. But I remember going to the B yard in Lancaster, which is the general population, level 4 general population. And when they started programming, I was one of the first ones coming in there. They told me, nobody's going to program, staff. Nah, I don't even know why we bother with this. I'm not even sure if maybe it was a warden. Somebody decided to do programming in B yard, and they brought me and a few other people in, but we were already getting the hi-hat, it ain't no good, why bother with it? Well, after not even a year, a lot of those COs in particular became fans because they saw the drop in violence, drug use, a lot of other things that happens in the general population yard, which is the situation where anything can happen in those yards. They saw guys had incentive. Even if it was minimal, it was enough incentive that they would want to do well in order to stay in those classes. And some of those guys took so many classes. They told me nobody's going to take classes in this yard. These are all knuckleheads. That's what they said. Oh man, most of those guys took classes. I get it. There was a lot of guys that didn't, and that's still an issue. But the ones that did were committed, and it proved that it did have value. So I think this is what we're saying. If you provide on the front end of the problem, like Daniel was saying, when people first get in, you don't have to keep them there. Not even 20 years, not even 15 years, honestly. In Europe, where I was fortunate, again, like Kenneth, I was able to go to England and Italy, which is not quite Norway, which is even better. But in those places, the prison I was in England, they had a horse program. They had a radio station. They had construction jobs. They had, and you think, I says, is this a special kind of lightweight prison? No, they had murders and the same thing, but they were providing a lot of programming for these people. And I spent 3 days there. It was really amazing to watch their interest and their talking. It wasn't supposed to be a perfect prison. It's not a perfect prison. They told me the problem is in the prison, but it was so much better than what I've seen. And in Italy, just so you know, I was working with these juvenile offenders that they brought to me. They didn't let me go into the institution. They took them outside and escorted them to me at a church right there in Rome. And I thought, well, these must be the bike stealers, the incorrigibles, the lightweights. Because I thought they're letting them out of the juvenile facilities. They don't do that in juvenile hall when I was there. I mean, you didn't get out. You were in, no matter what it was, you get out when the judge told you can get out. Well, what happened is there was a Spanish priest who was escorting him because I can't speak Italian. So he was my interpreter in Spanish. I had to do it in Spanish to get it in Italian. And I asked him, well, are these kind of lightweight kids? I looked at all the young people there and he says, oh, are you kidding me? He says, one guy killed a student in his classroom, stabbed him to death. There's another guy that was working for a little mafia and sent a bomb to somebody and blew that person apart. These aren't lightweights. I go, how do you let them out? It's because we give them, they do good. And when they do good, I don't care what they've done, they get opportunities to get out. And guess what? Nobody escapes.
Which city in Italy did you visit?
This is in Rome.
Rome.
I was totally amazed by that. And again, is it a perfect? No, it's not perfect. I'm sure that they'll complain about whatever. But compared to what we do here, they were giving people a lot of opportunities to do good. And the majority will do good. Yes, there's people that won't, but the majority will opt for that if it's given to them in a proper, comprehensive way. I hope I'm making sense. And I think that this is what we're talking about when we're getting rid of mass incarceration. I'm an abolitionist. Why? Because I'm not talking about just ending the prison system and all walking happy. No, I'm talking about replacing it with real programmatic, comprehensive, wholesome, ongoing, decent resources, tools, connections that all these guys would need who have been highly traumatized, highly neglected, or whatever the issues may be, because you can't even, they have all the issues you can imagine, that they can begin to connect to their humanity again, connect to community again, and then be able to contribute at a more positive, more enduring, more decent level. So I think that's what I would say. The end of mass incarceration has to be a proper replacement with real working with people in the front end of the problem versus after they've already lost it, after they already made a mistake, after they've already killed somebody, after they've already done some terrible crimes, then you bring in all the back end, because that's what we do. That's what the whole funding police and mass abolition of mass incarceration is about. And I know people only hear one side of it. They don't get the other side of it. It
remember next time you go to Italy, Italiano es muy fácil de aprender.
Pues si lo hacen más despacio,
no,
los entiendo.
Just listen more carefully. Okay, thank you guys.
If they talk slow, but they talk so fast.
That would never happen.
Hey, Louis.
I have to go to my third Zoom today.
Well, we're going to finish in about 5 minutes, so thank you. Thank you.
Just want to add one thing, Louis. Thank you, Sergio.
You bet.
Two things. The one is and this is like a little anecdote from when I was in the prison in Norway. We were being escorted around by a sergeant, and he was showing us all the various things. And at one point, I asked him, he's talking about how they treat the prisoners as human beings, blah, blah, blah. I said, well, how do the prisoners refer to you? Do they call you sergeant? Do they call you officer? He says, no. And his name was like, I can't remember what his name was, but, it was an odd Norwegian name, like,
Right.
Gragoli, or I don't know, whatever it was. But, let's say his name was George. He said, well, they call me George. And I looked at him and I said, no, really, I mean, what if they come up to you and they need to talk to you? How do they talk to you? And he said, well, they call me George. And I'm like, and I know everyone who's done time in America right now is going, you don't walk up to the cops and say, hey, Bob, how you doing? That just doesn't work that way, right? You would be in trouble by doing that. And finally I asked him a third time, and he got a little upset, and he looks at me and he says, I don't understand why you don't understand what I'm saying. They call me George because that's my name. What else would they call me? So I feel like it's another one of those little stories that sort of highlights the difference in the way people are perceived and treated. They call each other by their names because they're fellow human beings, And then the last thing I want to just throw in here, it's been completely not commented on that Luis Rodriguez is a great grandfather. That was revealed earlier from Ramiro. I just want to say, Luis, great grandfather. I'm impressed by that, and you've been keeping that on the down low, buddy.
Yeah, I look very young. I know.
You look so. I would have thought you're barely a father. Come on.
So we're almost at the end here, and I think maybe this is a great discussion. I appreciate. I hope there was great insights. I always like to bring all three of these guys because they've been there, but their insights are so crucial for all of us. I think for those who don't have family members or don't know anybody in prison, sometimes because their own family members, there's issues you don't always get what you hear from others who are there. One thing I do want to point out, though, that we're talking about these relatively better prisons in Europe. I've been to relatively worse prisons in Mexico and Central America. So you can imagine, even there's worse than stuff in Illinois or California, or even I was in a jail in Louisiana. That's probably as bad as you can get in the United States. But I was in prisons in Mexico and in Central America where they don't give you no food, they don't give you no clothes. If your family doesn't feed you, you're done. If your family doesn't bring you food, forget it. Where the guards don't even come in the prison, they just periphery. They just guard the outside. And so the guys inside have to make do on their own. And the gangs overpower other people. They start controlling things. Somehow they bring guns in there, probably to guards. They bring in cell phones. I've been in yards in Mexico and in El Salvador where people were armed to the teeth inside those yards. And so I'm just letting you know, there's some rough situations. In El Salvador, I was in this prison, no electricity, no potable water. They had mothers with their babies. Their babies were allowed to be in prison with them. In other words, the babies were grown up in prison. There was a famous prison in Mexico where the babies were allowed to grow up, and they grew up to be men. And they were closing down the prison because it got so overcrowded. It was only supposed to have 600 prisoners, and it ended up with 4,000. So they were going to close it down. And all these people came out with their teddy bears. These guys that grew up in prison. We don't want to get out. This is the only home we know. Can you imagine? Can you imagine that kind of world? I have to put that out there. There's worse situations out there. It's not to say that California doesn't require change, deep changes, because what everybody else is talking about is the level of inhumanity is still there, and it still is impactful. But again, I've been to situations where you couldn't even imagine. But here's one thing that I will share with you that I know the other guys know. Almost none of these countries have life without possibility of parole. That is a mostly a really American thing. Guys serving 20, 30 years for not even murder. 30, 40 years. I mean, just a lot of years. Ramiro was actually sentenced to 28 years. He didn't kill anyone. If he was within the law, he was supposed to serve 85% to 100% of that time. It just worked out to be declared unconstitutional when he convicted him. It was just the way things fell. That law, and that got fixed up, and now they have it that way. He was fortunate that he got through, so he can get out with half the time with good time, and that's what happened. But in other words, there are some things in this country that people can't even imagine. Because even in Mexico and Central America, where they don't have life without possibility of parole, if you tell people that, they can't understand that. These people are living, some of them 20 years, but in these terrible conditions, but they can't imagine life without possibility of parole. It's hard for them to even imagine what? people get this? So I just want to put it all in perspective. I think the whole system has to be changed. That's what all the protests, all the struggles is. It has to be systematic. It has to be more humane, and it has to be workable. There has to be practical outcomes, and I can prove to you that there will be practical outcomes. Even with the honor yard proven that it was the best thing, we still couldn't get the state to make honor yards in every institution. That was the only honor yard in all 34 prisons in the state of California. Even after we proved it worked, they couldn't even do it in the other yards. So we have a lot of work to do, but I do know that it's provable, it can work. And again, is it perfect? That's what people keep throwing at us. But I'm gonna tell you right now, the system we have is so imperfect, almost anything is better than that. And we're talking about things that are not just anything. We're talking about real, systemic, changeable things. So I just want to leave it with that, and hopefully you guys could share the book, get people to read it, get people to buy it at Tia Chucha's. It's a powerful statement of beautiful voices, beautiful stories. I wish we had the women here. We couldn't get the women, by the way, because the women's prison wouldn't allow us to use their work. We wanted to include the women, and they wouldn't allow us. So we got the men here. So anyway, thank you all so much for being here and listening. I don't know.